I'd like to talk to you about plot. A rather straightforward element in all literature, which is to say it is the description, it is the layout of events. But I'd like to give you a couple ways to think about it, because opera is a little more complicated than many art forms. Remember, it's an amalgam of 4 different art forms welded together. And the great glue of this complex art form is music, but we'll get more of that later. For now, I'd like to talk about the literary elements separately. And the first of these elements is plot. So first of all, remember that before the story begins, you will always have a backstory. You will have the lives and incidents involving these characters and the action, which came before, everything leading up to the beginning of the piece. So to some extent, to use this idea fully, we have to say that every play, opera, story begins in medias res, in the middle of life. So there is backstory here. This play occurs in 4 acts. And I've laid them out here in an arc. Or if you wish to think of it as a masonry bridge, that would be good also. Now, what I will do later is to talk about each of these acts in terms of the musical forms that fill it. And the musical forms are also, of course, literary forms, which came before the music primarily. So here is Act 1, here's 2, 3, and 4. Now, we are laying out the structural elements of plot. Now, a more common portrayal of plot is this dramatic one, this tracing of dramatic elements. Here we have the beginning, which would be exposition, largely Act 1 of an opera, although generally there's a little rising tension here. This moves through to some kind of a complex source of tension. Generally, this is an external force, or in La Boheme, it is the meeting of 2 characters who fall in love, and we'll talk more about that later. So they meet here, and Shazam, bingo, love. So the second act then is how this love develops. The second and third acts. And this leads, of course, toward a climax. So the second and third acts are generally part of what we call rising action. And this rising action works its way up in terms of tension to a climax. Generally, the climax will be a clash of some kind. It can be a supreme expression of love. It can be, as it is in this case, a tragic parting leading to death. Oops, I gave the plot away. And then there is a denouement, or falling action, which will generally be contained in the last fourth of the play. So, once again, exposition into rising action after there is a source of tension that's introduced. The rising action will occur over most of the opera, and this will be climaxed at a certain point, usually in the 4th act, and there will be a denouement of the action, which will provide us with that, the falling action, which allows us to rid ourselves of the fears and the joys that are aroused in us by the story up to that point, by the rising action up to that point. So this is the pattern, and in each of the acts, as we go through them in each opera, this structure will hold true. And I'll be pointing out the use of musical forms and how they work within that structure. Now, it's also very important to remember, this is a structure. It is the structuring, the laying out of events. But more than that, it is the container of the time-space continuum in which character and environment will interact, and from that in interaction will emerge theme, in the case of La Boheme, love, and its variation, and also, interestingly, the theme of poverty and its effects. So we'll come back in just a moment, and we'll be talking more about character.